Hi, and welcome to this episode of Things That Matter. I'm Brian Brodersen, and it's great to be with you today. And I am really excited to have my friend David Guzik in the studio with me today. David.
Hey, Brian.
Great to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, we've been trying to get you in here for a while.
It hasn't worked out for some months, but I'm glad it worked out today.
Yeah, it worked out today. David still is the pastor at Calvary Chapel, Santa Barbara, but you're kind of transitioning a little bit here.
Taking a new role, really what we're calling teaching pastor.
Yeah, right, okay. Teaching pastor is the perfect role for you because you are the Bible expositor extraordinaire. And that's what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about teaching the Bible because, David, you are really, God has just given you an extraordinary gift to teach. But also, of course, with the teaching, there comes the preparation for teaching. And you've helped so many of us just in that process. And then even further back than that is just the study of the scriptures themselves. And so I want to talk to you about all of that stuff. So let's start with let's start with the first one. Let's just start with teaching and preaching. You've been committed to that for decades, obviously.
Sure, something like I started teaching the Bible when I was 16 years old. Started teaching home Bible studies.
Amazing, 16.
Yeah.
And you jumped right in. Obviously, you didn't start pastoring a church when you were 16.
No.
Right.
But not too many years after that.
Okay.
Yeah. Lance Ralston and we started Calvary Chapel, Oxnard when I was only 19.
When you were 19?
So it was not very far after that.
Yeah. So how did you guys get this, you guys, because you mentioned Lance, but I'll just leave it with you, singular. How did you get this passion to teach? What happened there?
Well, part of it was just some unbelievable modeling that I received early on. The first Protestant preacher I ever heard was Greg Laurie.
Is that
the
right?
first Protestant church I ever walked into was Calvary Chapel, Riverside.
No kidding.
Back in about 1976.
Wow.
The only background I had with church before that was we came from a nominally Roman Catholic family.
Okay.
So
that's why you emphasize the word Protestant.
That's right. But to have the Bible explained,
yeah.
It was an entirely new world. Mm-hmm. And just both Greg Laurie's way and then Chuck Smith, who I mainly got to know through cassette tapes.
Okay.
At that time especially, Calvary Chapel Riverside, later Harvest, of course, they had a study center. And my brother and some of his friends would take me and we would go there and just listen to tapes. And that got me started. And listening to Pastor Chuck and Greg Laurie, that modeling of just bringing forth the scriptures plainly, it had a huge impression on me.
And I've often thought this, and maybe we've probably even talked about it ourselves together, but the thing about Pastor Chuck that I think for all of us probably had this experience to some degree, as I sat and listened to Chuck and was so impacted by, his ministry, I had this feeling of wanting to do what he was doing.
Yes.
Did you
there was something remarkable about that if you hear other people who are great speakers or orators, you're kind of in awe of them.
Yeah.
And the idea is, wow, they're amazing. I could never do what they do.
Yeah.
But there was something about the way God used Chuck Smith to bring the feeling of, that man did something remarkable, and maybe God could use me to do it as well.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, it's really, there was a magnetism to what he did that has drawn thousands upon thousands of men in the ministry, and indirectly women as well, to follow that example in teaching the Bible.
Now, I have to tell you, I don't think I've ever told you this, but I knew you by name pretty much. We might have met, once or twice, but that was about it. The first time I ever heard you teach was in Australia.
Oh, really?
And we were doing a conference together.
Right.
And I'll never forget when you got up and taught, and I just sat there going, who is this guy? Where did this guy come from? How can he teach how can he teach like this? Because the teaching was so great. Wow. And honestly, I didn't know, that gifting that you had. But, from that point on, I've been a big fan. But now you have written a Bible commentary, essentially. You've been working on, you've got several individual volumes, but you've basically been working on the whole Bible.
That's right. Well, it's kind of interesting because in one way, I've been writing a Bible commentary,
Yeah.
but it never started that way.
Yeah.
I mean, those were just the way I prepared my own teaching notes.
Yeah.
And through some surprising circumstances, I found out that was helpful for other people as Bible commentary.
Yeah.
And so in the last 30 years in total, my material's been out on the internet for the last 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
But really, the work goes back about 30.
Yeah.
I've been working, and I'm getting pretty close.
Yeah.
God willing, by the end of this year, I'll finish the book of Proverbs, and then I'll have something on every book of the Bible.
Amazing. Yeah, and so it wasn't intentional. You didn't sit down and say, I'm going to write a Bible commentary.
No, but once I saw that God used what I prepared for myself and other people could use as Bible commentary, then it did become intentional.
Yeah. You said something to me a while back that really, it was a profound statement. You referred to this Bible commentary as your life's work. And when you said that, I really liked that. And I thought of you as like Matthew Henry, or I thought of you as, Charles Spurgeon, or somebody who, left us with a life's work. And I just, it impressed me just how this is your life's work, and you are leaving a legacy. Now, I mean, there are still guys writing commentaries. There are still publishers out there that are looking for people, to come up and do a commentary so they can publish. But I don't know too many people that are doing that. And of course, in the kind of the larger Christian community, the evangelical community, people would even say, oh, well, commentaries aren't really, they don't sell today. Why don't you write a book about, how you planted a church or something like that. But
it's true.
Are commentaries...
Well, they're helpful. They're not obsolete, and they'll never be obsolete.
Right.
But they are kind of targeted. They don't go out to a general Christian audience, and since they're kind of segmented, if you have a commentary on Romans, not only are you getting the Christians just interested in a commentary, but a commentary on that specific book.
Yeah.
So from a publisher standpoint, it's not an attractive publish, but there's always going to be a place for them. And I'm really happy that the way God sort of planned my distribution for what I produce, it's free and it's online.
Yeah.
That's been a huge plus in people using it.
Yeah. You know what I love about your commentary? And my wife is one of your biggest fans. I mean, she's like, David Guzik, she just preaches David Guzik. Got to get David's commentary. But what I love about your commentary, obviously I read commentaries as well. Mm-hmm. And I'll pick up your commentary, and I will be able a lot of times to kind of know who you're, using as your reference point there.
Sure.
And I like that. And because you'll refer to Stott, or you'll refer to Spurgeon, or you'll quote G. Campbell Morgan here, or F.F. Bruce, or whoever. You got some guys, and it's all always really good. But then you've got that thing that God's given you. And oftentimes I'm reading and I'm going, okay, wow, this is so good. Where did he get this? And then, come to find out it's just the thing that the Lord gave you on it. Yeah. But what I'm saying is, one of the things about commentaries sometimes that's a little bit difficult is that, and especially, the really good ones, they were written so long ago.
Yes.
So sometimes the cultural context of them is just almost irrelevant.
Or just the language, the phrasing, the syntax that they use is hard to wade through.
So what I appreciate about yours is you've got that combination of kind of the old and the new. There's a contemporary feel to it where you go, oh yeah, okay, I can. This translates, right into today.
Yeah, and I do. Some of the commentators I like to refer to, some of them are the kind of old guys, the Charles Spurgeons, the Adam Clarks. Yeah. John Trapp is an old Puritan guy that I've really enjoyed reading the last several years, and guys like that.
Yeah. I think, based upon my reading of you and my knowing you and hanging around with you, I think Spurgeon is your hero.
Yeah, Spurgeon was a remarkable guy. And when you take a look, basically when I'm teaching through a passage, I'll look to see what Spurgeon preached on that passage.
Yeah.
And kind of from my observation, this isn't scientific, but it seems to me like maybe about a third of Spurgeon's sermons, he basically used the text as a launching point.
Right. Yeah.
You know, and,
Yeah, yeah.
and those are fine.
Sure.
But I'll kind of more skim those messages. But there is anywhere from maybe a half to 2/3 of his messages where his preaching is a brilliant exposition of the text. He will tear it apart and examine it from every angle. And I think I've learned a lot about exposition from Charles Spurgeon's sermons.
Yeah. Have you read the whole Metropolitan Tabernacle?
No, but probably more than 2/3.
Wow. Yeah.
Probably more than 2/3.
As a reference, or just I'm going to sit down
No,
and
as a
read
reference.
through this?
As a reference, because I've walked with Spurgeon through most of the Bible.
Yeah.
I'd probably say 2/3 or more.
Yeah.
I've read.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to come back to this in a second,
Okay.
but before we do that, I want to go same topic, but recently you took some time,
Right.
to work your way through this commentary, to focus on doing the Psalms.
Yes.
And you and I had a conversation about this, and you told me that you read probably 10,000 pages.
9,000.
9,000.
Yes, more than 9,000. Yeah.
One more. Okay, let's round it off.
Okay, sure.
Because it was more than 9,000. But when you told me that, I just thought, oh my gosh, you read, 9,000 pages on the Psalms to help you in your...
Right.
What was that like?
Well, Psalms, as far as commentary is concerned, I mean, it's just the biggest project that I ever have or ever will undertake. And I mean, as a process of time, it took me something like 15 years. Now, there were lots of times where I wasn't doing much.
Yeah.
And I've probably done more than half of it in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
But it is a way, because every psalm is its own universe.
Yeah.
And you have to approach each one on its own. You don't necessarily have, with rare exceptions, do you have like a contextual flow from one psalm to another.
Right.
And treating each one individually, and then some of the resources that are out there in the Psalms are so rich.
Yeah.
You have Spurgeon's Treasury of David.
Treasury of David, yeah.
So I would get double Spurgeon on all the Psalms. If he preached a sermon on that Psalm, I'd read it.
Right.
And then I also read everything he did in Treasury of David.
Yeah.
But then other commentators like James Montgomery Boyce has marvelous work on the Psalms. Derek Kidner is an excellent commentator on the Psalms. So collectively, I suppose I used about 12 to 15 commentaries on the Psalms as I made my way through it. And what I did was I just added up the pages from all those works, and it was well more than 9,000.
What is remember the Banner of Truth put out a commentary on the Psalms years ago. It was really a thick, I think it was a Puritan work on
I used one just on Psalm 119 by, I think his name was Bridges.
Yeah.
And it was marvelous.
Yeah.
And then some other ones. Another old Anglican guy that I used was George Horn, who did a thick work on the Psalms. And he was very helpful, just marvelous insights.
So what was your personal takeaway from all of that?
You know, I don't know if there's another book in the Bible that from an emotive connection teaches us as much about God and man as the Psalms. I mean, every aspect of God's nature and character, in some way, it seems to be explored in the Psalms.
Yeah.
But then also, there's not a single human feeling that we have, from the highest to the lowest, that isn't dealt with unbelievably in an eloquent way in the Psalms. It's a remarkable book.
Yeah, and I know by experience, seasons in my life where I battled with illness and things like that. There were times where I felt like I could have written this psalm.
Yes.
Because it was so, I can't remember if it's Psalm 78 or one of those psalms. There is the most accurate, clinical description of depression I have ever read anywhere. It's in a psalm.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, this is my experience, and David had the exact same experience.
Yeah, it's remarkable how they resonate.
Yeah.
And in the lows, yes.
Yeah.
But in the highs as well, in the exaltation of our praise and just love of God and the joy of this life.
Yeah.
It's so reflected in the Psalms.
So how many pages is the Psalms commentary?
If you were to put it in a single document, it's more than 1,300 pages.
Really?
Yeah.
So what's that going to look like as a book?
Well, I don't know. I mean, right now it's online content,
online,
so
yeah.
it's taken up a lot of bytes
Yeah,
on a computer.
my goodness.
But I don't know. I'll figure it out. Probably it would be in several volumes,
Yeah.
printed out.
So Enduring Word is your online.
That's right. EnduringWord.com.
EnduringWord.com. Okay. And then most of the stuff on there, though, has been published in book form, right?
The entire New Testament, several Old Testament books, and they're available for sale on the website.
Yeah.
The vast majority of people use the commentary, use it online.
They use it online.
Yeah, it's available there for free, and people use it. But of course, there's some people, there's always going to be those who would rather have it in paper.
Yeah.
And so we make that available too.
Yeah. That is great. Is there ever a point where you just go, yeah, I've read all of that, commentaries and stuff, and I just, now I'm done, and now I just...
Yeah, well, it's funny that you mention that, because really, in some sense, the message is the same to both, and that is keep putting in the work.
Yeah.
Sometimes a younger pastor or teacher kind of doesn't really appreciate how much work it can take.
Yeah.
And then sometimes they'll fall into the error of thinking that they have to preach everything that they've prepared.
Yeah.
This is a common trap.
Yeah.
And
I did that when I was young.
Yeah, to be an effective preacher, I really think you've got to be willing to leave some good things behind.
Yeah.
And know that it benefits anyway.
Yeah.
But then for those of us who've been doing it a long time, we need to be exhorted. You can't mail it in.
Yeah.
You've got to really sit down and study and dig into the scriptures, not only for the preparation of the sermon, but for your own soul.
Yeah.
The thing that I find most precious about my times of study is they are marvelous times of fellowship with Jesus.
Yeah. So you don't separate those two things?
No, I don't. Now, there is a devotional reading of the Bible kind of apart from preparing for messages.
Yeah.
But at the same time, my study for preaching is deeply devotional also.
Yeah.
I can't describe to you just the marvelous fellowship that I have with Jesus in and through His Word.
I wrestled with that for a lot of years. I don't know why I wrestled with it so much, but it was like, okay, these are my devotions, and this is where I'm connecting with the Lord, and then this is my study, and this is where, and it was this weird thing, and thank God, one day I just thought, how stupid is this?
I think it was kind of a reaction to the idea that sometimes we would read the Bible and just think about what it was for others.
For other people, yeah.
And that's the wrong way to read the Bible.
Yeah. And sometimes
whether you're
as a
preaching,
pastor, that's kind of what you're doing.
Whether you're preaching or devotionally, you have to read, and what is it for me? You have to let the Word of God impact you first in a profound way. And the study is the best place for that to happen.
Yeah. So really, I'm not saying this to flatter you, but you really are an excellent preacher, and your commentaries are very good, but you don't really have a formal theological education.
No, I don't. Sometimes I'm a little hesitant to talk about that because, not that I feel like it discredits my work. I mean, my work is there. People can judge it for whatever it is.
Well, you're like Spurgeon.
Well,
your hero.
But I would say this. I don't want people to think that I'm down on a theological education is a wonderful pursuit, and it's a good thing, but it wasn't the path that God had for me.
Yeah.
My ability just was really to educate myself.
Yeah.
And I often tell guys, there's no glory in an ignorant ministry. Our pastors, we should be educated.
I like that. Can I quote that? There's no glory in an
ignorant
ministry.
Now, sometimes, some people have the capability, the giftedness to really educate themselves through their diligent study. Other people, it's going to best happen in a more, formalized institutional setting.
Yeah.
But however you need to get it, be educated unto the work of God. Study to show yourself approved.
Yeah. Yeah. Languages, Greek, Hebrew, Semitic languages. How important do you feel that they are?
It's kind of a loaded question for me because I don't have training in Greek or Hebrew, and I feel that to a great extent sometimes, and it's something that I plan on pursuing more and more. But you do need to have an understanding of how to use the really good Greek and Hebrew resources that are out there. And especially to become familiar with the commentators who know how to tell you when there's something in the original languages that's going to be very helpful for you.
Yeah. As I look back over the years, I think I probably have a number of regrets, but one, I do wish that I would have, done the language thing.
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel like, not that I feel like, gosh, I don't really know what the text says because I don't know the original language. Not that at all, because obviously the English is
yes, and you're not going to stand up and preach from the Greek New Testament to people.
But even just sometimes for myself, I just wish,
Yes.
I wish I would have done that. As a matter of fact, I said to Cheryl recently, I said, honey, you know what? Let's study Greek together. Let's just make that a morning thing where we get up and let's just do a little Greek,
Boy, maybe I'll talk to Ingalil about that.
Yeah, and we can compare notes.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Gosh, man, all of this stuff is so good. So again, going back to, just I want you to just take a minute here as we wrap things up, and just encourage guys. What do you want to say to guys about just practically preparing themselves, becoming? Because, like you said, I'm like you. I've been preaching now for almost 40 years. But man, I don't feel at all like I've arrived or I've done all of that study.
Right.
Man, I feel like, oh gosh, I want to study harder.
Yes.
I want to know more. So maybe just encourage the guys just with a simple sort of like an approach to preparing yourself to be a preacher and to be a better preacher as you go along.
One place it begins is, especially like in Psalm 119, which is staggering. This longest of the Psalms is all about the greatness and the glory of God's Word. Yeah. And so often in that Psalm, you'll hear the psalmist declare, how I love your Word.
Yeah.
And honestly, especially because we're up close with the things of the ministry, we in the ministry, it's possible to lose our delight in the Word of God. And if there's people out there who have a ministry, they're pastors, teachers, whatever, and they've lost their delight in God's Word, not a word of condemnation, but say they need to seek God and just bare their heart before and say, God, give me a renewed love for your Word.
Yeah.
And then leading to that, I think it's very important when people study, when people prepare to teach, that they spend time with the Scriptures themselves first.
Yeah.
I mean, I think commentators are helpful. I use commentators. I write a Bible commentary.
Right.
But it shouldn't be the go-to thing first.
That's not where you start.
No, it's not where you start.
Yeah.
You used a phrase many years ago. Matter of fact, I think it was in one of those Australia conferences I heard you use this phrase. You used the phrase anointed exposition as something that is important to us in our Calvary Chapel sort of family.
Yeah.
And I think that's true. And anointed exposition doesn't come just by going slavishly to the commentators, though they help.
Yeah.
But it really comes from spending time and thought and not just giving mind but heart into the text.
Yeah.
And loving the Word again.
I remember reading years ago that Campbell Morgan, in his, whenever he would approach teaching a book, I think it was like he would read the text over at least 20 times.
Something like that, yeah.
Right? Yeah. And that stuck with me because I thought, okay, when I approach a new text, that's I want to do that as well. When I was younger, and maybe we can just talk about this for a quick second too. Because a lot of times people ask me, well, how do you study?
Yes.
And I have to say, I study differently today than I did when I was, maybe I'm talking to a 25-year-old.
Yeah, hopefully you study better now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, what I did in my younger days is I would literally get every conceivable, book on the topic. So I would, on my desk, I would have a stack of books this big. And I had to get through these, before I could teach my midweek study. And I remember so many times where I was I had so much information in my brain, I didn't even know what to say.
Yes.
Information overload.
Yeah.
And you kind of work through that,
right.
And you kind of figure it out as you go. But I tell guys today that what I do now, for the most part, is when I'm going to teach through a book of the Bible, I generally look for 2 to 3 really solid. And I, you do, I have guys that I just connect. I just like these guys. So I'm going to usually go to them. And then maybe somebody that I'm not so familiar with, but maybe somebody's recommended, like, hey, this guy's fantastic. But I found, and this has been, quite a few years now, but I really like this place where I'm at with the 2 to 3.
Yes.
And then sometimes I find myself where I used to I would make sure I went, kind of all the way through those commentaries. Even sometimes today, I find myself just sort of referencing them rather than actually, reading all the way through them.
Yeah, some commentators you learn to sort of skim.
Yeah.
Some you learn to read in greater depth.
Yeah.
Maybe at the beginning of a book study, you'll start out with several, and you'll weed through them.
Yeah.
And by the third or fourth week, you're like, okay, this is my stable of 3 or 4 guys or whatever.
And then, too, there's something to just the fact that there are certain commentators that you resonate with.
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely.
Because I remember, Pastor Chuck was the one who kind of just began me in my ministry and studying, and he gave me a library, and he had his favorite people.
Sure.
William Newell. Chuck loved William Newell. Griffith Thomas, and of course his favorite was Campbell Morgan.
Yes.
Campbell Morgan was his favorite guy, and for whatever reason, I just didn't seem to resonate so much with those guys. But when I read my first, I think it was Sermon on the Mount, Lloyd Jones, I just resonated with Lloyd Jones. Just his analytical thing. I just felt like, gosh, this guy, obviously he was brilliant and I'm not, but I just felt more of a connection.
Sure.
So there are commentators that you're going to connect with and resonate with, and there's others that somebody else might think, man, this is the greatest tool ever.
Well, and that's why don't struggle with the guys you don't resonate with.
Yeah.
There's going to be guys out there that you do.
Yeah.
You're just kind of inflicting pain on yourself in some ways
Yeah.
by laboring with the guys that aren't speaking to you.
Yeah. And, we got to do all of that stuff so we can say to other guys who are younger now, we did that. So you don't have to do that. David, this is great. And,
Thank you, Brian.
I hope we can have many more conversations.
I look forward to it.
Thank
you so much.
All right.
Thanks.
God bless.
Bless you.
All right. Thanks so much for joining us, and hope this has been helpful to you. We are all over the place online and social media, so if this has been a blessing to you, then pass it on to somebody else. All right. God bless you.